Welcome back to the Indian Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raj Balkaran, and you might be looking for some inspired insight that you can apply to your life, perhaps living wisdom for modern living. And when we use terms like living wisdom, what does that mean? What does it mean for wisdom to be alive versus not alive? Well, one way to think of this is that when insights are in a text and only in the text, especially physical text, are they being realized? Is anybody perceiving them? Right. And even when they're engaged by a human being, a seeker, a scholar, is the person who is reading them grokking or understanding? If you have a favorite composer of artist of whatever culture, whatever time period, modern times, pop artist, classical artist, let's just be cliche and use Mozart. Why not? If you haven't seen Amadeus, watch the movie Amadeus. You can, of course, come across the sheet music, and you may well have sufficient fluidity with reading music and translating what you're seeing on the page to what you might be hearing in your mind. You may have a sense of what the music sounds like, even. But unless and until the music is brought to life and someone has an experience that the music is meant to facilitate, it doesn't live. Whether that experience is on behalf of the performer, the conductor, the audience, all of the above, and then it lives. It lives insofar as it participates in the human condition, in the human experience. It is experienced directly by human beings. Now, many an insight in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, might be fascinating for the mind to grapple with, to chew on. And yet there comes a time in every reader or seeker's journey where that insight becomes more than an interesting idea. There's an aha moment. And aha moments necessarily facilitate expansion. There's an expansion of awareness where we grasp, where we realize what that verse has to do with our marriage, our child rearing, our relationship to social media, our embodied existence. Then the wisdom becomes alive. It lives within us. Part of the power of Indic culture, Indic thought, the propagation of Indic ideas is the presence of living lineages, unbroken lineages of understanding, of transformation, of transmission from ancient times, which continue to transmit the experiential dimension of the teachings. And crucial to this is this idea of the teacher or the guru. But this is only half the equation, because what is a teacher without a student? What is a student without a teacher? The teacher and the student are both two wheels on the chariot of transmission. And if neither wheel is functional, well, that lineage is in a bit of a ditch now, isn't it? A proper teacher, a knowledgeable, empathetic, insightful teacher is quite rare. But would we not say so too is, an earnest, intelligent, well-intentioned student? Is this also not quite rare? Of what use is the knowledge if it is not passed on? But to whom do we pass it on? To what extent can any given student comprehend the mysteries of existence? How much do we pass on to whom and by what metric? Such are the deliberations of student-teacher traditions of old and into modernity. I can assure you that for example, in my own training, not everything was taught to every student, and not everything was got by every student to whom it was taught. But the mechanism, the criteria whereby teachings were given, were transmitted, had nothing to do with demographics and caste, gender, age, nothing to do with that at all. I had co-disciples, just as I have students of a variety of ages and stripes and occupations and you name it. The criteria has to do with swabhava, swa meaning own and bhava meaning being or nature. By the disposition, by the proclivities, by the propensities, by the capacities, right? In which vessel does one pour wine versus water versus elixir, ambrosia, etc., etc. And this is a deliberation that has to do with readiness and preparedness. But nevertheless, the knowledge must be passed on. So by some grace, the vessels have shown up. Perhaps some of us are a little bit rusty, a little bit cracked, but nevertheless, there's an argument to be made that a rusty vessel is better than none at all. Part of why we're having this discussion at present is because although podcasts exist in the timeless time of internet content, this particular podcast is released at a time where we are coming up to the next full moon, Pūrṇimā. All of the full moons are significant in Vedic culture and Indic culture. Some full moons are much more so than others. The one that's coming up is extremely important because just as in the West, we have a Mother's Day and a Father's Day. Well, in Indic culture, we have a Guru Day. So this is Gur Pūrṇimā, or the full moon dedicated towards the Guru. Now, it very much is dedicated towards the teacher and honoring and revering and respecting and perhaps extending gratitude towards your teacher, whether that is a Guru proper or an acharya, an instructor, maybe a particularly inspiring university prof or online teacher. But above and beyond the teacher who is the face of this, it is a day to honor the lineage of transmission itself. That has been entrusted to the teacher, even in a secular sense, right? To whom do we entrust knowledge, right? Who guards the acquisition of knowledge, whether dharmically or adharmically, right? So the teacher may be the face of that, but what we're really honoring is the extent to which the teacher embodies and is able to disseminate and implant living wisdom. So it's really the transmission of the tradition that is being honored, in my view, the face of which might be said to be the teacher. However, forget not that of what use is a proper teacher without a proper student? Of what use? So the story today that I wish to tell very much is related to the theme of sharing wisdom and the importance of sharing wisdom. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in ancient times, there was born into a Brahmanical lineage a great sage. And he was, probably because of his previous proclivities, interested in Vedic learning. He actually sacrificed the pleasures of life and social relations to devote himself to the profound wisdom texts of old, Vedic texts. By the end of his life, after decades of dedicated effort, his learning was great indeed, but it was not complete. So upon passing away, he was again reborn into a Brahmanical lineage by pressures of karma, by the karmic process because of his samskaras or impressions or proclivities. Then he's able to flow into a similar ilk, birds of a feather flock together, even across rebirth, apparently. And so with this second subsequent life, he brought with him sort of the unconscious muscle memory. And so he knew that he needed to study these things. He really knew that his soul was on a mission, and so he did. So he doubled his efforts and studied passage after holy passage, day in and day out, memorizing the entire Vedic revelations and gaining insight into these sacred scriptures. As all creatures' lives rise and fall by the wheel of samsara, by the wheel of cycle of rebirth, this second subsequent life too came to an end, and he left his body to enter another for a third subsequent similar incarnation. And in this life, because of the dual pressures and antecedents of these previous two lives, the sage was ablaze from a very young age with a passion for Vedic learning. Reborn again in Vedic circles, he was a child prodigy, astonishing adults with the knowledge he possessed. As unassuming as a child might be, we all have experienced this. Some little ones possess extraordinary poise and knowledge and wisdom, and they are astonishingly able to hold their own in adult conversations. It's quite fascinating. And some, of course, possess astonishing skill. We have a 7-year-old Amira, for example, this extraordinarily gifted opera singer who just with a couple of YouTube videos was able to sing opera as if she'd been doing it for 30 years. And not just her technique, but just her teeny tiny lungs, she can fill a room. I believe she was discovered on one of the European talent shows. Nevertheless, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. So every once in a while, we come across an individual who didn't have the opportunity to learn the skills that they have. Whether that's evidence of reincarnation or not, I leave that up to you. But as the story goes, that was exactly why this sage was a child prodigy. From a very young age, he took to Vedic learning and learned the Vedic texts forwards and backwards, inside and out. By the end of this life, he was confident that no living soul knew the Vedas better and that his task was complete. He had learned all that he could learn. So upon his deathbed, he concentrated on the divine, on the supreme, actually in the form of Shiva, Maheshwara, the great Lord, the great God, Lord of Yoga. Yes, because he was hoping to access the heavenly realms through the grace of Shiva. The great God indeed appeared before him, and he prostrated before the Lord. Noble sage, said the Lord, great is your learning indeed. You have in fact been studying Vedic revelations with passion and dedication for 3 lifetimes straight. With this, the Lord presented the sage with a handful of dirt and said, this represents the learning you acquired in the first of these 3 subsequent lives. Pretty sizable, isn't it? And Shiva released that handful of dirt, and he picked up an even larger handful of dirt and said, this beautiful mound of dirt in his hand represents the learning you learned in the second life of yours. Perhaps we should say soil than dirt, although they're the same. Soil has the connotation of fecundity. And potency, and dirt has the connotation of something one wishes to get rid of. So he picked up the second handful of soil, and then he released that. And then the Lord picked up a third handful of soil. He could barely hold on to it. And he said, this is the learning you've amassed in this third life, sage. The sage smiled and said to the Lord, now that my learning is complete, O great Lord, O Nilakanta, O blue-throated God, will you take me to your celestial abode? Oh, my dear sage, replied Shiva, these fistfuls of dirt represent the learning you have amassed. Have a look outside the window. Look out to the Himalayan peaks out the window. That is the vastness of all you have yet to learn. The sage was aghast. Great God. I've devoted myself to Vedic learning for every available minute of my life. What more could I do to master the Vedas, Lord? Are you sure you wish to know the answer, noble sage? Yes, Lord. Please tell me, and I will do everything in my power in my next life to complete my learning, because I will unconsciously remember what you say, because as we know, the soul records all exchanges, whether the mind remembers them or not. Dear sage, in your eagerness to cloister yourself and assimilate the sacred verses of the Vedas, you haven't learned how to share the wisdom they contain. The world and all of its social interactions, this Prakriti. This is the greatest wisdom school ever created. Its dean is actually my consort Parvati, the Shakti of Shiva. Life's lessons are learned within this realm while interacting with others, and even knowledge is crystallized when spoken aloud and shared. Sometimes you don't even know what wisdom exists until a pariprashna, until a proper question is asked. For a proper question, a well thought out question, can succeed in expanding the revelations themselves. But without meeting students, without such questions, how can you be afforded these opportunities? This is where your learning lies, great sage. And then your soul's journey will be complete. With this, the Lord smiled, and with a twinkle in his eye, he vanished. Contented by the divine revelation, the sage passed away with a smile upon his lips, meditating upon the task at hand, the task with which he was charged by the divine itself, by Shiva himself. He was intent to apply all that he learned in his next life, and by the power of that sankalpa, of that intention, he found himself reborn in an exalted circumstance indeed. He was the son of none other than Brihaspati. Who is Brihaspati? Brihaspati is the advisor, the priest, the guru of the gods, of the devas. When the devas need a powerful ritual done, they go to Brihaspati. When the devas need counsel, they go to Brihaspati. He was born as the son of Brihaspati named Bharadwaja. And he learned a great deal from his father. Brihaspati strongly suspected that he was a prodigy, incarnate with a great deal of knowledge. So it took a little bit for him to remember in this life all of the Vedic learning, but certainly by 12 years old, he'd mastered all of the Vedic texts. But then his real training began. He apprenticed with Brihaspati. He did not just learn the structural glories of the Deva Bhasha, the language of the gods of Sanskrit. He did not just learn about the machinations of karmic theory. He did not just learn about the insights to be garnered by Vedanta and Sankhya and all of the classical darshanas. He learned how to counsel. He learned how to hold space for others. He learned how to teach. Bharadwaja learned not merely about divine grace from his guru, who was his father in this case. I suppose when one is born into a great guru as a father, one need not seek out a guru. He learned not only about divine grace, but about social grace, equally as important. And he became a great counselor and a great teacher of what use is understanding Vedanta if one can't apply it to the gaps in a particular student's knowledge so they too may understand it. Of what use is mastering Ayurveda, the science of life, ancient Indic holistic medicine, if one can't apply it to help someone heal? Of what use is this knowledge absent application? Of course, there's great utility in learning for learning's sake. And of course, there is great joy to be had in the epiphanies one has upon such learning But really, anything worth having is worth sharing, isn't it? And do we not value it all the more when we share it? How much more delicious is a meal when we have a loved one to share it with? So Bharadwaja found the sharing of knowledge, the dissemination of knowledge, to be quite fulfilling indeed. And it brought him unparalleled joy. At the end of that life, he was granted release from rebirth, having learned both his lessons in the Vedas as well as those a worldly life presents. Now, let me read a little bit of the spiritual gloss from the stories behind the poses. This story is actually the final story. The stories behind the poses, there are 50, and this is story number 50 for a variety of reasons. Embodiment, our existence, our corporeal existence in this realm, in which the materialists perhaps mistakenly take to be all that exists. But embodiment is not an obstacle to divinity. It can be, certainly it can be, if we're distracted by it, it certainly can be, but it need not be ultimately an obstacle. Actually, the embodied state, the majesty and mystery of this very body, I mean, it's mind-boggling. Brain function, the endocrine system, I mean, the entire system is mind-boggling. You get a cut, you bleed a bit, and magically the skin knows how to put everything back the way it was. And the examples go on and on. This body is a divine machine. So embodiment is not an obstacle to divinity, it is an expression of it. Wisdom does not require us to eschew the world, to reject the world. We are here to embrace the world. We are here to embrace people within it. One of my students recently put on my radar the tour of this great Indian saint, beyond awakened, Amritanandamaya, colloquially known as Amma, the hugging guru. And she's beyond detached and she's beyond awake, and yet she literally embraces the world. Right? The wise are called to affirm the world, while of course refraining from becoming fully enmeshed within it. Be in the world, not of the world. Like a lotus emerging from a swamp. Nothing is worth having if it isn't worth sharing. Purpose in the world is defined by service to others. You want to find your purpose? Find what you're good at. Find what you enjoy. And find what others want and need. Find the Venn diagram. And the overlap of those three, that's a great place to look for your purpose in the world. Okay. Imagine the impact you have when you teach what you know. Even one thing, one moment, one idea, one lesson. Imagine the transmissions rippling down, touching life after life, moment after moment, illumining situation after situation. This was the wisdom Bharadwaja needed in order to multiply his fistfuls of dirt to become the Himalayans themselves. Right? And so this is a really important lesson in light of the significance of Gur Pūrṇimā. In light of the fact that we are benefiting from transmissions which have been kept alive for how long? And without the links in the chain of those transmissions, where would we be? Without Guru's grace, however you conceive of that, where would we be? And so hopefully this podcast transmission has occasioned some welcome churning in your psyches and your beings. And hopefully you will find the time to give thanks to and honor whatever teachers, teachings, students, traditions, whatever aspects of these divine transmissions which have touched your life over the years. Keep well until next time. Keep listening, keep thinking, keep churning, keep learning. If I can be of service to you, it is not difficult to get in touch. By all means, please do. Keep well until next time. Namaste.